Hey, Word of Life, I'm delighted to be able to be here with you this morning. Thank you so much for such a warm and sincere welcome that me and the family have experienced in the few weeks that we've been able to be here with you. And I'm delighted that Pastor Randy invited me to come and share something with you. So whether you're listening live on Sunday morning, whether you're catching up with this later in the week, I hope there's something here that's going to be a blessing to you, something that's going to be encouraging to you. And it's amazing, the times that we find ourselves in, the circumstance that we find ourselves in, man, you know, I can't think of any other time where everybody has been affected, everyone in the nation has been affected at the same time in such a significant way. I don't know what else would have to happen for everybody to be impacted directly by something that is going on. And here we are, and it's the same for my family and for your family. There is not a single person all around the world, but especially in the United States, nobody can claim to have sidestepped the impact of everything that is going on. And I don't know what else that's happened, and for you it may be different than it's impacted me. But every single one of us has been impacted, and for some people it may be something extremely severe. I mean, we're talking about people getting extremely sick and even fatalities, and maybe you're mourning the loss of a loved one right now. Maybe you yourself are actually find yourself being sick, and you're in the middle of fighting through this, this sickness that's sort of going around all over the nation. Or maybe, you're looking at the economic side of things. Maybe your business has been directly impacted. Maybe you've been laid off from work, or maybe you're trying to rearrange your entire life because kids are home from school. It's affected people in all kinds of different ways, and no matter how it's affected everybody, strangely, it's pulled us together. And so my wife and I, as we've moved up here with our 3 kids from South Jersey to come and be a part of this church here in central New York, and we're incredibly excited to do so. We do it in a time where the country is on the same page because things have just been flipped upside down. To one degree or another, nobody listening to this now, nobody anywhere in the country can claim that they have avoided this. And so all of us are in the same position. And it's helpful and it's healthy for us to remind ourselves of a truth that is difficult to believe in the moment. But the simple truth is that God is able to take the good out of a bad season. God is able to take the good out of a bad season. And there's many people that are listening to this. You have experienced that before, where you have been through a bad season and yet you have seen God take something good out of it. Now, that doesn't mean that we would willingly walk into a bad season because we think that something good is going to come out of it. It doesn't mean that we would retrospectively look back at this time 10 years from now and say, man, I long for the days of going back to a national shutdown. That doesn't mean that, but it does mean that if we stay the course, it does mean that if we continue to plug into God, if we continue to stand firm in what we believe and keep focused on Jesus Christ, the Son of God, He is able to pull something good from it. And it may be easy to say, but it's not always easy to walk through. And what I've begun to see and hear from people around me, and even people I may not even know, but I'm kind of aware of through social media or some other means, is that it's starting to become easier and easier for this whole season to get the better of you, to get the better of me. It's starting to get easier and easier, and it's sounding like more and more that people are starting to succumb to the pressure that this season is bringing. It's starting to be more and more stressful. It's starting to come in. There's more and more fear that's creeping up. There's more and more people that are just content to just hunker down at home and just completely start disconnecting from that. It's starting to become easier, and I'm starting to hear more and more things along those lines. But one of the things I want to share with you today is I don't believe that's the approach that we're going to take. I don't believe that's the approach that the Lord would have believers take to this situation, is just to settle for this whole thing overwhelming us. And then when it's done, then we're going to start getting better. Then we're going to start reassessing things. Then we're going to start. I think that there is something in this season where we can take the good out of a tragic, terrible, awful, unfair situation. If we plug in and we focus, we can take something good from this. I want to share a verse with you, and I came across this verse recently, and it spoke a lot to me, and I think that there's some encouragement in here. And it's from the book of 2 Thessalonians, and this is Paul writing to a church that, among other things, they're dealing with some persecution, some legal problems in Thessalonica that they were up against, and so they were facing an incredibly tough time. Paul writes these words as he's opening his letter, starting in chapter 1, verse 3. Dear brothers and sisters, we can't help but thank God for you. We can't help but thank God for you. And what is he thanking God for them about? Because your faith is flourishing. What is it that Paul can't help but thank God about? It's that their faith is flourishing. Not because life is easy. Not because everything is going their way. Not because all their prayers are being answered. Not because everything they could ever dream of is coming to pass. But their faith is flourishing. And your love for one another is growing. Your faith is flourishing and your love for one another is growing. In the middle of some impossible situations, in the middle of life being downright unfair, their faith is flourishing and their love for one another is growing. Verse 4, we proudly tell God's other churches about your endurance and faithfulness, despite things being tough, despite things being unfair, despite things being depressing. They kept on flourishing in their faith. They kept on growing in their love for one another. And it was so powerful and it spoke so much to Paul that he couldn't help but proudly tell God's other churches. He couldn't help but thank God for what he was doing. In all the persecutions and hardships you're suffering. Now, the persecution of the church that was happening 2,000 years ago, it's very, very different than the national shutdown due to a pandemic that we may be experiencing today. But this is written to a group of people who were under an immense pressure, who wanted to give up, who had really, really good reasons to give up. And yet they were growing in their faith and God was clearly working among them. And the tough question that I would put to you today is, what would Paul tell the other churches about you? Would Paul tell the other churches that your faith is growing? Would Paul tell the other churches that your love for one another is growing? Would Paul tell the other churches about how you're enduring despite the terrible situation you find yourself in? That's a challenge that I'm taking directly. Is that what Paul would say about me and my family? Would Paul say that, Tom and his wife Megan, that they're growing in their faith, that they're growing in their love for one another? That the hardship is not slowing them down in their faith, but they keep going. They're enduring. They're pushing through. They're committed to keep going and persisting and growing in their relationship with God. Is that what Paul would say about me? And even though we're all affected very, very differently by what's going on and everything that's happening, whether it's health-wise or political or economic, despite all these things that are going on, we're all affected so, so differently. I wanted to share with you, and what was on my heart to share with you today, is that I wanted to identify some useful, helpful things that we could share that I believe are going to make this situation a season where you would reflect the church in Thessalonica from 2,000 years ago, that your faith would be growing, your love for one another would be growing, and that God would be doing good things in your life. And so I wanted to just identify a few things, simple things, that you could put into practice today, immediately, and that you would start to see God using those simple things just to make sure that this season isn't where this whole stuff gets the better of you, but rather you're growing in your faith and you're growing in your relationship with people around you. So I turned to the book of Proverbs to try and find something helpful. And the book of Proverbs is somewhat of a unique book in the Bible, because I don't believe that, the experts, the academics and the scholars, the people that are world-class experts in the Bible, they wouldn't say that anyone sat down one day and just wrote the book of Proverbs, but instead it was a collection of sayings. It was over time as these things were spoken, whether it was things that Solomon had started to introduce into culture and Solomon had started to speak, people would start to write these down and collect them and then compile them into what we have today as the book of Proverbs. And the Lord was just using these sayings that had come up and sprung up so that they were helpful. That were helpful to the people in biblical times, in Solomon's day and in the Old Testament times, that were helpful as they navigate life. And they were compiled in the book of Proverbs. And if you ever spend some time, and I highly recommend you do, going through the book of Proverbs, you'll see that for yourself. It doesn't read like a lot of the other books of the Bible. It's short snippets of things oftentimes. It's short sayings that are easy to memorize and very easy to attach to your life. So I went to the book of Proverbs and I've identified what I think are 4 easy and simple things that I believe are going to be helpful. I've got 4 Proverbs. If you wanted to write this down, if you're taking notes today, if you don't normally take notes, this is a great morning to do it for the very first time. Grab a piece of paper, grab your phone, write it on something, and I encourage you to check out these Proverbs through the week. And I believe these are going to be a blessing to you. So here we go. 4 things. 4 things to add to your day. The first thing is add purpose. Add purpose to your day by feeding your faith. Add purpose, feed your faith. Proverbs 9 verse 9. Instruct the wise and they will be even wiser. Teach the righteous and they will learn even more. See, this echoes the idea that Paul is saying that, the wise are getting wiser, the righteous are growing in their relationship with the Lord. And it's the same thing that Paul is echoing in 2 Thessalonians, that the church is growing in their relationship with God. It's not a relationship that stays static and that maintains the status quo, but instead it is growing, it is evolving, it is developing, it is deepening. And that's the same principle that we see here. Keep growing. Feed your faith. It's the flourishing and growing faith that we heard Paul talk about. And it reminded me of a story that I read a number of years ago. I read this a number of years ago and it stuck with me. And there's a story about a guy who had 2 dogs. And every Saturday morning, this guy would take his 2 dogs down to a racetrack and he'd meet with a whole bunch of guys down there and they would all take bets on what dog was going to win the race. And one week it was this dog and the next week it was the other dog and then it was this one and then this one again and then that one. And there didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason why one dog won run race one week and one dog won the race the next week. I made that come out of my mouth. I deserve some credit for that. There was no rhyme or reason which dog won what. There was no rhyme or reason. And eventually they said, hey, how come one dog wins one week and one dog wins the other week? And the guy said, that's for me to know and for you to find out. And what they noticed is that this guy, every week, he would bet the right dog would win. The dog owner bet every week which was going to be the winner. And eventually they got sick and tired of this guy cleaning up from the money and said, okay, no, you have to tell us. How do you know which dog is going to win? And he said to them, I know which dog I feed. If you want your faith to grow in this season, I believe you do. If you want your relationship with the Lord to go deeper this season, if you want, as we just read from Proverbs, for your wisdom to become even wiser, of your righteousness, you'll learn even more. If you want that deepening to happen, that flourishing to happen, it won't happen by accident, but it happens by intentionally feeding. And the amazing thing is that in 2,000 years of church history, nobody has reinvented the wheel about how to feed your faith. For 2,000 years, Christians have been developing and feeding their faith and growing their relationship with the Lord and growing their relationship with what God is doing in their life and expanding their faith and deepening their relationship simply by reading the Bible, having prayer time, and spending time in worship. That's it. In 2,000 years, nobody has reinvented that wheel. For 2,000 years, believers have changed the world by simply turning to the Bible, digging in, spending time in prayer, and spending time in worship. And in this time, you can do this from the comfort of your own home. There's the Bible app on your phone, which I'm using more and more in my own life. There's worship music that you can get for free online. There's ideas on how to pray. All these different resources are available to you. And something I would say on this is that I don't know who's listening to this right now, and my encouragement to you would be start where you are and step up a little. Start where you are. You may be here right now, and you may have been getting up early in the morning and spending an hour in prayer and an hour in Bible study for decades. And God bless. I'm delighted that that's your story. What's that next step up for you? Maybe it's adding a devotional. I don't know. But you may be here right now and you may have never opened a Bible before in your life. Maybe you've never dared pray by yourself in the comfort of your home. You may have never put on worship music and just tried to experience worship the same way that we would as we gathered together in a typical church service. This week, even today, give it a try. 1 minute in the Bible is better than no minutes in the Bible. 1 minute in prayer is better than no minutes. And if you're completely dumbfounded, you don't know how to start, you have no idea about how to even take a first step in this, I encourage you, email somebody here at the church. Go online, find an email address, contact someone at the church, and we will give you some ideas about what a next step would be. For those of you, you spend time in prayer, you spend time in worship, you spend time in your Bible every day. Add something to that. Maybe there's a Christian book that's going to be encouraging to you, that's going to build faith, that's going to help give you some perspective you might not have had before. Maybe there's a podcast you need to check out or a YouTube resource or read a blog online or something. But in this time, feed your faith. Make sure the dog that wins is the dog that you've bet on. Make sure the dog that wins, because it's the one you're going to feed, and you want to feed the right dog. I'm going to move on. Number 2, add value to your day. Add value to your day. Connect with somebody. People is what the Lord values most. The Lord gave his life for people. That's what he values. That's what he values. And as believers, we should do the same. That's what Paul was saying. Your love for one another is growing. Connect with somebody. Proverbs 11:25. The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. Now, generosity, oftentimes it's a word we use connected directly to finances, but right here in this proverb, it's so much larger than that. It's not just about, with your finances be generous. Of course, that's a part of it, but that's not all this is. The generous will prosper. It doesn't just mean, those of us who are happy to share their finances with people will prosper. No, it's people that have an outlook on life that is bigger than themselves. It's the people who have time for other people. It's the people who have a kind word for people who need one. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. This is a tough time. And I don't want to belittle some of the struggle that some of you may be going through right now. It may have taken all the energy you have to log on today. The idea of having to answer a phone call, the idea of having to communicate with somebody might be so overwhelmingly exhausting, you can't even comprehend the idea of connecting with somebody. But I want to suggest to you that to take the promise that's right here in the Proverbs is something to be taken seriously. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. There's a blessing in blessing others. There's something uplifting about uplifting someone else. There's someone encouraging about encouraging someone else. Take a step. It might take so much for you to dig deep and have to pull out your phone, text somebody. If you're really sort of feeling the weight of this, that might be exhausting to you. But I would encourage you, take this promise seriously. Reach out to somebody and encourage them. Something that I've been doing myself during this time is I've been going through my phone and I've just been looking through, people that I've kind of lost some connection with, haven't spoken to in a couple of years, not because we had an argument or anything like that, but because, they moved away or they changed jobs or something like that. And it's been amazing, the stories that I've been able to hear. A friend of mine, he moved state with his wife and he's a prison guard in Kentucky. And he was explaining to me over text message what it's like to be a prison guard right now with all this going on. It was amazing to hear what he had to say. Another friend of mine has moved state the same time that we were moving state in the middle of all this. And so we were able to share about what it was like to try and move with all this craziness going on. And another friend of mine, him and his family are very involved in a homeless outreach ministry in New York City. And so he was able to share with me some of the horrible stories that they've had. But it was amazing to be able to reach out. And these people weren't necessarily expecting to hear from me, but it was great to be able to reach out and communicate. And I hope that communication brought some refreshing. And I can say from my own experience, I love this. This felt great to me. Just to be able to reach out, see how you're doing, to hear some feedback on how this is affecting you and your family. Man, some of the stories I've got back were really tough, and I was able to hopefully lend some encouragement. Some of the stories were uplifting as people were doing fantastic in the middle of some absolutely wild stuff going on. I would encourage you to take this. And from my experience and my experiences with the church as we've been transitioning up here, I think this is something the Word of Life is incredible at. I think this is a church that you're committed to being a refreshing to others. So I would say, don't let this season stop that. Don't let this season be a roadblock to you being a refreshing to so many other people. You go and be a blessing to people. You reach out to people. You let them know you're thinking of them. You ask them how they're doing. You see how you can be praying for them. And I believe that as we do that, we're going to feel that refreshing as well. All right, number 3. Are we doing okay, everybody? If we were in church, I would expect an amen. If you feel comfortable doing that in your house, that's fine. If not, I won't be mad. But number 3, to add to your day a highlight. Add to your day a highlight. Do something that brings joy. Proverbs 15:13, a glad heart makes a happy face. A broken heart crushes the spirit. Now, this is a varied recommendation to do something that brings joy. For one person, it's making a TikTok video. That will not be me. For someone else, it's ordering some of your favorite coffee online. For someone else, it's reading a favorite book. For someone else, it's going for a long walk. For another person, it's getting up early in the morning. I don't know what it is. Maybe you want to learn a new instrument during this time if you're quarantined at home. I don't know. It's varied. But do something that brings you joy. Do something that makes you smile. Do something that is a highlight for your day. Because I want you to read the second part of this proverb. A glad heart makes the happy face. That's cool. But look at the second part. A broken heart crushes the spirit. I think if perhaps I was at home listening to this and someone sort of said, do something that brings joy, I would just sort of say, yeah, it's easy for you to say. I got all this other stuff going on. I got all these other responsibilities, got all these things that, I need to give my attention to. Yeah, right. Go do something that brings joy. That's just, two-dimensional stuff. It's not important right now, but a broken heart crushes the spirit. This is not encouraging people to be selfish. This is not encouraging you to just put a happy face on things. This is trying to get you to not have a broken heart or a crushed spirit. Do something. Find something that brings you joy. If it's doing something with your spouse, find something that the two of you can do together. If it's something you do as a family, that's awesome. But do something so that when you put your head in the pillow at night, you can say, that was the highlight of today. That was something that was good today. That brought joy today. There may have been a whole lot of other stuff that day that didn't bring joy. But I encourage you, dig deep, get a highlight, make it happen so that you can look back at something that made you smile that day. Make sure your day has got a highlight. Fourth thing. Add structure to your day. Plan tomorrow. Plan tomorrow. Proverbs 21:5. Good planning and hard work lead to prosperity, but hasty shortcuts lead to poverty. Plan for something to do tomorrow. What it is and the size of it, that's not important, but simply waking up, starting strong, knowing that you've got something to accomplish today, something you need to do, something that has got your name on it, some checkbox that you need to take off, have something that you wake up knowing you need to get done today. So you wake up with a sense of, this is what I need to get accomplished. This is what I'm going to do. You're starting the day strong when you've got in your mind, there's something that I need to do. Good planning and hard work lead to prosperity. Good planning. The day before, just pick one thing. And I don't know about you, but as I'm driving out and about and I'm running errands, as little as I'm able to, but as I'm driving around, there's one place where the parking lot seems jam-packed all the time. Home Depot. Home Depot. Jam-packed all the time. To me, that indicates that some people are already doing this. Or more to the point, the wife is planning this for their husband, but that's another story altogether. But people they're getting stuff done. I'm not talking about you remodeling your kitchen. Maybe you are, and if that's what you're planning to do, and you wake up every day and you're like, okay, today we're going to get those cabinets figured out. Good for you. That's awesome. But it doesn't matter what it is, but wake up with something to do each day. Wake up with something to do. And this is something that if you were to speak to healthcare professionals, mental health care professionals. Of course, I'm not one, but I have heard mental health professionals say that if you add some structure to your life, if you're facing crippling depression, adding some structure to your day gives you the best fighting chance of breaking free. Add some structure to your day, get some predictability, get a goal, get something that you can check off the list, put something in place that's going to be helpful. But it doesn't have to be ginormous. It doesn't have to be a Home Depot type project. It can be as simple as making your bed each day and just deciding, I'm going to make my bed each day. Now, I didn't make up that idea. I actually stole that from somebody. And I want to read to you a portion from a book by a guy called Admiral William McRaven, and he's a retired U.S. Navy officer. And in 2014, the Admiral gave the commencement speech at the University of Texas. And if you go on YouTube and you search for it, you'll find that it has had millions and millions of views. And he ended up taking that speech and expanding some of those thoughts. And he wrote a very short book simply called Make Your Bed. I want to read to you just a few paragraphs. And this is from chapter 1. Making my bed correctly was not going to be an opportunity for praise. It was expected of me. It was my first task of the day, and doing it right was important. It demonstrated my discipline. It showed my attention to detail, and at the end of the day, it would be a reminder that I had done something well, something to be proud of, no matter how small the task. Life is hard, and sometimes there is little you can do to affect the outcome of your day. You search for something that can give you solace, that can motivate you to begin your day. That can be a sense of pride in an oftentimes ugly world. But it is not just combat. It is daily life that needs this same sense of structure. Nothing can replace the strength and comfort of one's faith, but sometimes the simple act of making your bed can give you the lift you need to start your day and provide you with the satisfaction to end it right. Make your bed. And those are the 4 proverbs that I wanted to pull your attention to. And I truly hope that you take a moment this week and maybe sort of spend a few minutes every day just reading over those again. But I truly believe that giving our day a purpose, giving our day a value, giving our day a highlight, giving our day some structure will help us prepare for being stronger and growing, ready for when we're on the other side of this. Feed your faith, connect with somebody, do something that brings you joy, plan for tomorrow. And as Paul says, our faith is flourishing and our love for one another is growing. We're not settling for just hibernating and hiding ourselves away. We're not settling for feeling overwhelmed and frustrated about what's going on, but instead we're committed to growing by having a purpose, a value, a highlight, and a structure to each day. I've got a couple of questions, and maybe it's helpful for you to take a note of these, and then sometime during the week, take 10, 15 minutes and just pray through these. Or just take a few moments to yourself. This is not concerning anyone else. This is just for you. The first question is this, what's stopping you from starting these things? I really wanted, and it was on my heart, that I wanted to get simple, easy things that you could put into practice today. These aren't time-consuming. These aren't things that you have to practice for. This is just something that you could start today to feed your faith, to connect with somebody, to do something that brings you joy, to plan for tomorrow. What's stopping you from starting these things? And the second question, what are you going to do tomorrow? How are you going to give your day a purpose? How are you going to give your day a value? How are you going to give your day a highlight? How are you going to give your day some structure? And I know that it can be tough. There can be some tough moments. And in our house, when there have been some tough moments, oftentimes my wife and I have kind of just had to shrug and just sort of admit and just remind ourselves that God's in control. God's got this. This is not bigger than him. This season will pass. But it's caused me to think to myself, I have no idea how somebody would be able to handle this season without faith in God that I'm able to have. I have no idea of how somebody would be able to look at this situation and find hope in a really hopeless situation if they did not have a faith in God. And I don't know if you may be on here today and you wouldn't describe yourself as a Christian. You wouldn't look at your life and be honest enough to say, you know what? I'm not following God. I'm not following Jesus. I am not living a life of faith. And if you're here today, I want to let you know that the Bible teaches that it's the Holy Spirit that draws people to himself, which means that just the fact that you wanted to log on today and you're even asking these questions is a clear indication to me from a biblical point of view that God is at work in your life right now. And I'll let you know that when I became a Christian, everything changed for me. I'm not going to promise it was always easy. There were ups, there were downs, but I've never regretted my decision to follow Jesus. And if you believe today, right now, right where you are, if you believe that God is for real, and you believe that he loves you enough that he would send his son to die a death on a cross to pay a price that you and I should pay but never ever could, if you believe that, my friend, you are out of excuses for waiting another minute to follow him. And it's as simple as praying a prayer. And where you are right now, I'd love to invite you to pray. It may seem strange that you're in a kitchen or your living room or maybe you're in your car. Or I don't know where you are, but it may seem strange like, okay, I'm really going to start praying with this British guy over the phone. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. And if you're here and you're a Christian, I want you to take a moment and pray with us and pray that anybody that isn't a believer, that this is a moment where they decide, you know what, I'm going to let Jesus take over. I'm going to let him be Lord. So I want to invite you to close your eyes just so that we can focus on what really matters right now. And just to yourself, quietly or as loudly as you feel comfortable, you just say, God, I believe that you love me. I believe that you care. I believe you sent your son, that he died for me. And I want him to be the Lord of my life, to fix my broken relationship with you. Lord, help me take each step day by day. Amen. Amen. If you prayed that prayer for the first time, there's a button on the screen in the chat room section that you can click to let somebody know that you prayed that prayer and that they'd be honored to just connect with you for a few minutes, see how you're doing, see how we can help. If you're listening to this after the fact, please take a few seconds and let someone from the church know, hey, I prayed that prayer. I want to start living a life of faith. I want to follow Jesus. I believe. And I'm ready to start living like I believe. And this, in the middle of all the crazy, could be the greatest day for you. Word of Life Church, I hope this has been a blessing to you. I encourage you to take those 4 things, put them into practice, and I believe that when we get the other side of this, we'll be stronger in faith. We'll have a greater love for one another than when we went in. God bless everybody.